Yeah, let's do this.
Taking a step back, identify the messes, and then do the hard work in order to achieve success. Welcome back to another episode of the Entrepreneurial Family Man Podcast.
Closing up deals this month. Maybe I won't have to think about my real issues.
Kind of like whistling, walking by the graveyard. Just, keep on going. So I'm here with my band of brothers here today, and we want to talk about taking a step back in order to explode forward. Chris McCluskey, Jamie Slingerland, Michael McGreevy. We are just guys who are crazy about our wives. We love our kids, and we want to thrive in business and truly believe we can have it all.
I receive it.
Yeah, baby.
Let's jump into this fun conversation. Every guy likes talking about cleaning up their messes, huh?
Get out your pooper scooper conversation here. So if we're talking about identifying some of the messes, the issues in our lives that need to be addressed, why even talk about that? Why not just kind of move forward and achieve and do the things we need to do to get success? Why is it so important to go back and deal with some of our stuff?
In our conversation before we recorded, we were talking about all the things that we've done that have been truly successful and maybe what the catalyst for these have been. And I'm looking at you guys, and we have these epic failures in our life, deep insecurities, and we've dealt with a lot of our pain, our insecurity, I had a lot of debt and other relational issues. I think that the easy thing for men to do is just plow forward and ignore that. Like you said, you're whistling as you look at the graveyard, just ignoring it. Not only for ourselves, but we have these heroes. Their biggest failures is what made them learn and have success.
Jamie, you mentioned, let's just kind of dig in here a little bit. You mentioned some debt issues for you that you had to address at a certain point in life. Talk about that journey. What made you own up to wanting to address that?
For me, it wasn't owning up. I think the pain got so bad that it came to a head. My personality, I just don't work well under stress. I need to be freed up to get up in the morning and smile and be positive. Positivity is one of my top strengths. And so when I have a mountain of weight and stress on me, I just can't operate. So I just had so much anxiety and frustration that I didn't have options to work out of that giftedness. That for me, it's positivity and waking up with a smile on my face and saying, I'm going to go after this opportunity and that opportunity. The debt just held me back so much that when I faced it, I started to get pumped up and excited, and then I could operate out of my strength.
Oh, man, I used to hear Dave Ramsey say, you can't out-earn your stupidity. And that always used to bother me because I was like, oh, yeah, Dave, I'm going to start a business and I'm going to just earn so much money that I can pay down all this debt later and I'll just move past it. But he was right. When he said that, like, I had some thinking around money and I had some systems or some ways that I dealt with money that were perpetually causing me to be stuck where I was in debt. And I needed to actually take a hard look at that and rethink the way that I looked at money completely. Man, if I would have launched my coaching business in the middle of the debt that I had before paying that off, I would have crashed and burned. I'd still be putting out that fire.
I couldn't build things when I was in survival mode, when I was just doing everything I could to pay the bills and to not have all that stress. For me, when I cleaned some of that stuff up, I had margin to pour into the things that I needed to do in order to build a business. We need that space and that margin and that peace for us as creative entrepreneurs to also fertilize those ideas and that passion that we have. If we're just busy, we miss out on creative ways to grow our business. And I had none of that when I was deeply in debt. I was drowning. So how do you build a business when you're drowning? I can't.
Oh, totally. There's an emotional weight to being under debt. It's like trying to be creative and inspired and motivated when you're dragging this huge anvil behind you with everything you're doing. It's just not going to flow the way that you need it to. It's hard enough to start a business, then to have that weight and that emotional stress, forget about it.
I think so many guys are in that kind of survival mode. And the anxiety is real. I mean, you guys are not alone, whether it's debt, whether maybe it's your marriage or workaholism or your health. I mean, there's so many things, issues, right? These identifying messes in our lives that hold us back that we've got to move forward with. Chris, when it comes to you in this conversation, what was an issue or a mess you wanted to address head on back in your career?
Yeah, I mean, personal stories, but this has got me reflecting first back even on a chapter that I wrote for a book years ago. The book was called Coaching the Coach, and it was just stories of how coaches had built their practices. But the chapter I chose to write was entitled Growing Your Business by Doing Less, which is completely oxymoronic because you figure you're growing your business, you're going to be doing a whole lot more than you already are. And my point was really the one that you guys have just underscored here, that oftentimes one of the first things we got to do is deal with some old junk. Clear the decks enough to be able to do a new thing, because Jamie, your metaphor of I can't build a business while I'm drowning. Anything that's just kind of out there saying you gotta deal with this is going to steal at least our emotional and spiritual energy, if not also our time and our focus, and perhaps the relational support that we're going to need from our spouse and other people that love us and all. So attending to those things, absolutely critical. For me, in my 20s, probably the single major thing I had to attend to was what I actually referenced on our very last podcast here when I was talking about my theme song from college that my classmates gave to me was, "Do you know where you're going to?" Because they recognized that I didn't know where I was going to. I did not have clarity of vision, mostly about a career path. How in the world are you going to provide well for a family? I mean, I didn't have to make an amazing amount of income, but I was going to have to provide, and I was just clueless on that whole thing. And unfortunately, even after they confronted me with that song and I was all embarrassed and I continued to date and court Rachel and eventually got engaged to her and married her, I was on my wedding day and still did not have a clue what I was going to do career-wise. I didn't even have a job at that point. Got a degree, woohoo! But what are you going to do? Well, I'll roll over into a master's degree. Yeah, that'll do it. When are you going to get a master's?
Perpetual student.
Yeah. It was literally that lacking of clarity. And I'm embarrassed to say, but it's absolutely true, and it's illustrative of the point. Stuff I had to deal with had to do with vision and basically owning who I really am, what I was actually created for, which to a large degree on the career front was not being an employee. It was entrepreneurism.
Man, I think a lot of us can relate to that, McCluskey. Nehemiah, now you started a business when you were 5 years into marriage. What was that thing for you?
Oh, man. Let's see. It was end of 5, start of 6 years. And I'd like to say, kind of like you, Michael, it was like we could have started this coaching business and it had gone up in smoke. My business would have gone up in smoke, because my marriage at the time was not in a good foundation. Because of that, I was the one focused on my own success, my ego, kind of my selfishness of my career at the time. And we were kind of ships passing in the night. I got married young and was pretty naive and dumb. Prior to starting our first business together, we really had to do some deep dives into, okay, how do we reestablish this relationship? This is our foundation for who we are and how we can build from there. And so, man, it was literally having to own up to some bad stuff and taking into account, okay, I want to work on myself as a husband, as a leader here first, before I can then go and launch into a business. So that was a tough one, man. I know that there are probably a lot of guys out there who might rate their marriages as a 6, 7, or 8, and maybe your wife doesn't have that high of a number for you.
Oh, I was the guy that I probably thought I was a 5 or a 6 too, Nehemiah, and Ruthie was the one who had discernment to know that it was very, very fragile. McCluskey, when you were talking about all the career stuff that you were going to and you didn't have a clue, man, I feel like I'm right smack in the middle of the two Chris's, or not in the middle, but I had both issues. I had
Chris sandwich.
My marriage was like it probably wasn't even a 5 or a 6, but that's what I thought it was. And I don't know if you felt this, McCluskey, but this is my story. I felt deep insecurity because I wanted to be a provider and I didn't have direction. And because I was that peg that wouldn't fit in the hole, and I needed to be an entrepreneur, and I didn't know how that could look for me. I didn't know the path. I just felt like a loser working job that didn't pay me enough money to support my family. And probably the worst thing was I didn't have hope because I didn't enjoy what I was doing. I wasn't proud of myself. And I mean, in retrospect, I'm not trying to make excuses for my marriage and not being poured into it, but I had so much insecurity with who I was and the way I felt that it was really hard for me to come to Ruthie with a full cup and invest in that marriage. Again, it's embarrassing, but I felt just beat up and disillusioned. So that's
authentic, Jamie, to share, where you felt that anxiety or not connected to the, who you were and kind of the insecurity. There's so many guys, I think, like that. We struggle through in some areas. And so it's like, boy, it's just easy to avoid this one because there's pain there. And maybe I've got some affirmation here. So I'm just going to keep going forward with that affirmation. That's your thing. Is it your job? Is it the man cave you have to escape to because you don't want to deal with some of the other issues in life? I think that resonates with a lot of guys. Yeah,
man, that so resonates with me. I mean, I thought that if I had success in another area of life, that it would naturally clean everything else up. I mean, I had so many messes in my 20s that I needed an enormous mop bucket to clean them all up. Jamie, what you're talking about, I had a lot of the same stuff, just such like a low opinion of myself and low self-confidence. I struggled with anxiety and fear. And I thought that, oh man, if I could have a big win in business or if I had this amount of money, then all that stuff would kind of just level itself out. And clearly, like, that doesn't work. That stays there under the surface until you walk through it and face it and take some steps toward it.
When McCluskey said, oh, I'll move on to graduate school, that's what I did too, because I was working this job that I didn't feel proud of who I was. And so at least I was in the International Business Graduate Program. It's sort of easier to move towards those things than take a big look in the mirror and take responsibility.
If point number one here is identifying the messes and addressing those, like you were both saying, Michael and Jamie just there, move into this point number two then is to do the work. You've now identified and you've named what that is. Maybe it's debt, maybe it's your marriage, maybe it's your health, workaholism, whatever. It's some anxiety or insecurity you have. Step number two is kind of the harder part. Now you got to actually do it. Commit to doing the work.
Here's the thing, Chris. Not a lot of guys like to celebrate because they are going to counseling for their marriage. Or, fellas, check this out. I was struggling with my money, and me and my wife had a really hard conversation where there's a lot of tears, and I feel like we're really making some headway. Like, nobody likes celebrating that stuff.
It's so much easier to just talk about sports, right?
Yeah, totally. Feels like a step backward in a lot of ways, doesn't it?
Well, it is a step backwards, right?
That's exactly right. And that's really why I love the title that you guys put to this particular episode there, Chris, when you talked about like stepping back in order to rocket forward. We've got to look back at whatever those things are. When people would come into me for counseling, back in the years of me doing counseling before moving into coaching, oftentimes it was the guys who were coming to me privately and saying, how much am I going to have to confess here? And my advice was always, well, imagine that it's a big burlap sack. I'm going to recommend that you not only keep reaching into that sack and pulling out whatever is in there until it's out, but when you're done, you turn that sack inside out and you pull the lint out of the corners of it.
That's a great point, Chris. It is really digging deep and going inside out to take responsibility for whatever it is, whatever this issue that you've identified.
Right.
Go big.
I like the metaphor. I like that it has a burlap sack, which is very, very uncomfortable, scratchy. Nobody likes burlap. Picking things out of the seams, and it's super painful and uncomfortable.
Yeah, but McGreevy, I love that when I was using that metaphor, I could see you on the screen here, and you were acting like the Incredible Hulk, like ripping that burlap sack all totally apart. Any one of us, we're always going to have the potential to screw up again. If you do something stupid again, irresponsible with the money, if you make poor choices, whatever, then that's the thing that's going to hold you back from the next propulsion forward. Because I want to destroy the ability for me to ever do that again, but I can't.
Jamie and Michael, you guys talked a lot about some of the debt struggles and the Dave Ramsey, but what did that look like when you were in that and you decided, I am going to commit to do the work to get out of this? Michael, what did that look like for you?
It didn't feel good, I'll tell you that much. It felt like almost like I was having to fully admit my failure and take it on completely. And instead of being able to brush it under the rug and move forward, I had to almost like take the full weight of the bad choices that I had made. And while that didn't feel great, it led to something great later. It meant changing my lifestyle and pulling back my spending in a lot of key areas. It made looking at my finances in a completely new way necessary. And over time, it wasn't sexy at all. Over probably a 3 to 4 year time, I worked my tail off to pay down that debt. And I remember the day when I walked into the bank, because the credit card was the last thing. I walked into the branch with cash. I think it was like over $2,000 in cash, and it was the remaining balance of my credit card. And I slapped that down on the bank teller's desk, and I said, I want to close my account. And they're like, whoa. You sure? You sure you want to close it? We have these other awesome products for you. We have this new credit card that came out. And I said, no, thanks. I'm done. And I remember that day, and it was all worth it because it set me up to have that flexibility and peace of mind to start thinking about, okay, how do I want to approach this next season of life?
No, one thing that me and Ruthie have talked about this a lot of the lessons that we learned by cleaning up our mess and being so aggressive and kind of getting upset and angry a little bit, getting fired up, like a passion fueled us to just have that stuff out of our life forever. I think it really made us who we are today. When big challenges come, where we look at each other and we, instead of us making excuses of why we couldn't do that, we think, of course we could do that. We did the impossible. We learned how to work together. We created these big goals, and we were honest about the mistakes that we made. And what a crying shame it would have been if I just took 10 years and cleaned up that mess. I think it'd be fair to say that I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't get aggressive and just decide the life that I felt my family and I were supposed to live.
I love how you guys both identified the fact it is not a sexy thing to do. It's hard. It's messy. It's not a quick fix either. You guys both said years. This wasn't a weeks or months long thing. This was years. But you did it, and now look at what's happened. I mean, you set a foundation for yourselves, your marriage, your family, your business, because you did the hard work. Jamie, you guys paid off like 90-something, didn't you?
Yeah, I feel embarrassed because Michael did more than me, so let's just not talk about it.
But that's what it looks like from the debt perspective. You know, for me, it was doing the hard work meant doing some stuff that from the outside looks kind of immature at my age. But because I was on such a poor footing as a husband, as someone who wanted to be a father, man, I had to submit myself to a bunch of guys on a weekly basis and just talk about a lot of the stuff going on and some insecurities with life. And, you know, it was Christianity 101 and AA all combined into some stuff. It was going to some counseling. I mean, this is probably one of the first times I actually shared that like publicly out loud, but just being able to have this season of life where I knew, boy, if I want a marriage to thrive, I've got to deal with myself. And there were some deep-seated things there that had to happen, but man, it set up, and it was a couple of years. I remember getting baptized again, which was a big declaration for me since I'd already done it early on. But some of those things were so foundational to then set Alicia and I up for an awesome marriage. And now we get to have 4 little kids that we just love and enjoy every day. But boy, if I didn't deal with those issues at that time and just kind of went into the next thing, another train wreck.
Chris, that is so awesome that you got baptized again. I think that's so powerful because, I mean, even sometimes in the Christian world, like you get baptized as a teenager or in your early 20s, and gosh, you being married and for that long and in your Christian walk for that long, there's some humility involved in coming back and saying, I need to take a step back and do this deeper work. That's like a feeling we all have to confront to clean up our mess, right? We have to kind of admit what's really going on because, you know, deep down we feel like, oh man, I should be so much further along than I am. How am I still struggling with this thing? Or why am I still stuck here? The more that you try to avoid that feeling and sweep that under the rug, the more that you're just holding yourself back even more.
Wow. Chris, I hugely affirm you for everything. That's some of the first that I've heard you share pieces. Frankly, you didn't pick up the marriage that you had. You got a different marriage. You really got baptized again because you knew you were a different person. You got a different marriage. You've got a different trajectory now for life as a result because you cleaned up stuff. You turned the burlap sack inside out and took the lint out of the corner. You got rid of the stuff that was there that would have bogged you down.
Guys, I'm inspired by this conversation because in a lot of the circles that we roll in, the self-help movement or positive psychology, there's this metaphor, right? That the windshield is so big, but the rearview mirror is so small. But man, we've all gone through pain and struggles and insecurity. And when there's like a gorilla gaining on you in the rearview mirror, it takes a real man and a whole lot of courage to suck it up and face that gorilla straight on.
Yeah. The crazy thing is sometimes stopping and facing that gorilla that's coming after you is where the gold is anyway.
Yes.
It's where you find yourself. I know it's where I found myself and how I want to help other people is by sitting in some of that pain and that mess.
Oh, man. It's like in the movie The Matrix when Neo finally faces Mr. Anderson and he's got that look in his eye like he knows who he is and he has the confidence to go after it, to face his fear. And that's where all the strength is birthed in that moment when you make that decision to turn around and go the other way. Instead of the temptation maybe to outrun the gorilla and downshift. We don't have a Porsche like McCluskey, so we might not be able to do that.
No, this is so good, guys. It really is. It's facing that gorilla, facing our giants, whatever that monkey on your back is. You know, identifying that because that's where so much is birthed, and there's beauty from ashes, as they say, right? But just as we wrap up, I want to just address that. Like, what is it for you? Where are you hiding out and why? Like, is there a virtual or literal man cave where you go because you have to escape some stuff that you don't want to deal with or that you've swept under the rug? What do you want to take on now and do the hard work now for success later?
Thank you for listening to the Entrepreneurial Family Man Podcast. Visit efmlife.com to connect with us and others like you who are pursuing success in enterprise, family, and marriage.